This is the Real Footy Podcast. Coming up, Stephen King's Demons dance an Irish jig on their way to an upset win over the reigning premiers. Jeremy Cameron bags 10 as Sam Darcy's knee buckles in Geelong, and a Nick Daicos masterclass in his 100th game is overshadowed by concerns for Carlton's Elijah Hollands. All that and more right after this.
Steen was up and knocked it down. Nick Daicos advanced it to Schultz. Schultz got it there to Chris. Back to Nick Daicos. Gave the handball away. Cameron the standing start. Big long ball around the corner. Would be a miracle start. Soccer off the ground for Daicos. Kicks it. He's got it. They need to get it into space. Sharp wins it still. Langdon controls the footy. Neat little ball in. Couldn't mark it. 5 seconds to go. Melbourne by 2 points. Not going to get there, Brisbane. We're pretty close, but Melbourne win on Tuesday at the MCG.
Yeah, he's pretty shattered with his game, to be honest with you. So I spoke to him after the game, and he was really disappointed with how he started the game. Yeah, he sort of feels like he's let people down, but we've just got to keep supporting people through those situations.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson. Joining me today, Caroline Wilson and Jake Niall. Welcome to you both. And it is the issue that's completely overshadowed not just that game the other night, but also the season really. What has happened with Elijah Hollands?
It's the biggest story of the year. It's so far, and it just looks terrible for the Carlton Football Club. And they're
terrible for Elijah primarily. To see him in such distress, evidently.
Yes, but I think the way this story has gone, the focus is on Carlton's failure rather than Hollands' clearly unfit state to perform. That's where the story's gone, and
and we've all been covering football for a long time, me longer than any of us, and I have never seen this level of alleged mismanagement by a footy club in terms of an on-field incident. I mean, we think about the outcry that happened after Christian Petrarca, who wanted to go back on in the King's birthday game, and in the end chose not to pursue any sort of redress against either the venue, medical, his club, or anyone. This is different again because everyone saw it. It played out in front of our eyes. Carlton are being reviewed, their medical team primarily, but their coach and their footy boss will come into this, the whole club will, as to how they allowed this player to play, to stay on the ground and come back on again even after three-quarter time. And my view, Jake, is that this could become a work-safe issue because there were changes to the Mental Health Act late last year by the Victorian government, and I'm not sure whether it'll be anything more than a bit of a wet lettuce. And you're right, there's two terrible stories. One is a mental health crisis that clearly unfolded in front of all of our eyes with Elijah Hollands, and clearly everyone's thoughts are with him. But we're footy journos, and this happened in a game, so we need to scrutinise Carlton.
I think Carlton are scrutinising Carlton, and what will happen here as a point of process is that Carlton are still doing as we speak, because the players went away for 2 or 3 days. The players have not really been, to my knowledge, grilled about this by the club about what they saw. The Carlton players, the Collingwood players have had their say in sort of whispers, but the Carlton players have to have some say in their version of events insofar as they saw Hollands' state. There's questions about their leadership of the Carlton players, about why there wasn't. That's another little factor in this. And of course, the coaches, the performance part of the amount of information in the box, whatever the questions about the medical assessment, and that is a big part of this.
2 doctors and a nurse.
The psych was rung. They rang the club psych.
Yeah, but at the ground, in the Carlton huddle rooms, whatever, there were 2 doctors led by the head doctor, Matt Chamberlain, and a nurse who they have on staff every week.
Right. That's correct. And they also had
cleared him to play.
They also had a dial-in to the psych, and they've recently changed psychs at Carlton. So that's all part of it. And then
did they dial him in?
Yes.
During the game?
Yes.
And he cleared him to play?
Well, the conversation with the doctors cleared him. is the assessment.
Well, I'm aware of that, and and Michael Voss, who spoke to the player specifically at halftime, but we've seen them vision of them talking at the minor breaks. And Michael Voss, I mean, I think he said he wanted to keep playing. That's my understanding, Elijah Hollands. But Michael Voss too, why he let him play on, and why Chris Davies, an experienced head of footy, didn't come over the top of all of them, even if he wasn't as close to the situation.
He is known to be a fidgety, nervy type of guy, and there are people that can present that way, and you try and disentangle what's just normal performance anxiety and what's acute performance anxiety. And clearly he was, in hindsight now, we could say he was clearly, to anyone watching, this was not normal behaviours. You don't know to what extent that was analysed by the medical people and whether or not he presented to them better than he did once he was back out on the field. But what's troubling is that players that go into games with a minor hamstring or something, there's this battery of medical people that are analysing every step they take and getting them off the ground and giving them a rub down and giving them treated. We knew from the way Elijah was cut from the team, cut from the list, then was the last player back on their list. They are acutely aware of his mental health history and his prior drug and alcohol use. And you would think that in those circumstances, they would be acutely aware of the potential for an episode to be occurring with him. And to then see the way it played out was really distressing. And initially, you just, knowing his background of having, had a cocaine use and that you just, when you first saw the footage, you thought, oh, what's going, he's on something here. Now, initial reports were no, and that actually made you feel worse, that you were sort of, this guy's actually had a mental issue. And I know that, Cara, you spoke at the weekend, you reported at the weekend that the Collingwood players had said that they spoke about the fact that they thought he'd been drinking.
One player said that he told one of the players he'd been drinking. There were Carlton people had heard that as well. Now, I put that allegation to people at Collingwood and Carlton, and no one denied it. So I'm staggered that, I've been targeted for saying it when clearly this is part of it.
I asked them a question on Friday
story.
too. So I asked them on Friday.
No denial.
They definitely on Friday, and this story seems to me to be somewhat movable.
And further to that, on Monday morning, I was at a media event and spoke with Braden Maynard, who said, and asked him about it because he played in the same, in the back line, so he was in the area. He said, look, I was aware of conversations on the field about him meeting amongst his teammates. He said he didn't pay, so he knew that they were talking about Elijah and something happening with him. He didn't go into detail of what they said, but he said, I was too focused on myself and the game to pay it too much attention. But he was admitting that, that they were talking about it, the Collingwood players. Now, whether they put two and two together with him, whether he was drinking, the sort of, if he was drinking, you do look at him and knowing his background, think, well, it's more effect than cause, isn't it? Like you look at him and say, well, that's what he's doing to try and self-medicate. And I know, we're suddenly becoming overnight doctors here, but self-medicating to deal with his own
It all
anxiety.
goes to the alleged level of incompetence from Carlton, if in fact that is proven. That is why I think it's reportable, particularly when you're getting a no comment from everyone concerned, and not a denial.
I wouldn't say denial. I got steered that they do not. There's no evidence for that. There was it was strongly being pushed against that alcohol on Friday. Now that story seems to have been fluid because it was an obvious question to ask. The other thing we should not ignore here is the possibility of medication. I don't think that's an open question as well.
Prescription medication, you mean?
Well, players that have the sort of issues that he's had, many of them have, and people have medications that they're prescribed. And prescription medications is also a factor that has to be a question in this, and whether even if a substance was not taken, and the effect that can have on behaviours. So there's a lot of questions, but what I don't think is really in dispute is that this was ineptly handled, and that the football part of the club should have had him off the field, irrespective of the source of the problem.
Well, as we said previously, Jake, that that one of the things of coaching on the bench too is to have this close contact with your players, and that's over and above the number of interactions you have with players before the game and all the people they interact with before the game with rub downs and medical, health treatment and physios and that, but then the coaches and line coaches and everyone that had dealings. Now, maybe he was more, he presented more acutely out on the field than he did off the field and in the rooms, because it beggars belief that from what we saw, what the public all saw, the footage that we all saw, raised alarm bells with the novice that there was something going on.
And the other thing here, Caro, is that he was the last player picked on the Carlton list. Carlton had reservations about picking him up. They put him through a pre-season to see whether Elijah Hollands could remain on the list or be put back on the list. They had a spot. They consulted with players about whether to keep him on the list, and they kept him. He is in their best team. He's got a level of talent that they wanted. I think that's a reasonable. It's not gone well so far.
You saw with those teammates. You saw what happened on Sunday when Harrison Petty got clearly something very strange happened. A case of the wobbles, delayed concussion. Well, that's what the footy boss said.
He lost vision.
And you saw his teammates get around him and show care and make sure something happened. You almost got the feeling in the vision bits that I have now seen that the Carlton players were looking away from this situation. So let's park what is clearly a player who is unwell, and again, he is the primary concern. But we're football journalists. The wider question about the Carlton Football Club and the problems they've had with quite a few players with various mental health issues and levels of anxiety, you just wonder now, and there are people close to Carlton who are saying this, they're finding it, maybe it's going to be too difficult for them to deal with this, and maybe they're going to bypass players like this in the future.
Maybe.
This has been brutal, but that conversation is being had.
There's a lot of players that have a lot of mental health.
I know.
I'd be a little careful on that. I mean, his brother's in the team as well. I'm not sure willful blindness to that degree would override sort of concern for a teammate.
How on earth did no one, you said it earlier, or one of you did, how on earth did none of the teammates demand he be taken off?
Maybe they did.
And they were ignored.
Maybe. We don't know. We're just, for all we've seen, it would be surprising if no one was asking those questions, and all we can know, what we need to find out, and Carlton themselves are saying, well, we need to find out what went wrong for this.
So Laura Kane's investigation is a medical one. She is now the AFL's head of concussion and all things medical in football terms. So she'll be talking to the doctors.
And to Michael Macdesey is involved, and I believe Kate Hall is involved.
Oh, well, they're mental health bosses, but it's being overseen by Laura Kane.
Yeah.
And it's a medical investigation at the moment. Well, Carlton need to make it more than medical, in my view.
Yes.
Once the AFL have continued what they're going to continue. And really, what do you do? Is it a heavy fine, like the Elia situation?
I was going to say it's more similar. You mentioned a few earlier, but I think it's more similar to the Port Adelaide handling and the concussion with that obviously different issues, but it feels similar to that. How was this handled?
Well, I'm reluctant to condemn the doctor and the psych because I don't have the information on his state that others have. Prima facie, Carlton this is a stuff up of enormous proportions. The question of where you allocate the blame and the failing, it's a system failure. There is a system failure, and I don't think the football people. I don't think the football people are in any way off the hook. The coaches are in charge of performance.
Potentially, I raised this morning that we have these head injury protocols. Player comes off, and there's a whole series of steps. But for someone who going into the game with a known mental health issue, not to have a similar sort of protocol of this is how we have to. If someone's presenting in a certain way, what do we do? Who do they see? Where do they come off?
Yep.
Maybe those protocols were applied. Maybe they did have that. But if they did, it seems surprising that he was still out there because
yes,
what we saw.
It's we can see what we can see. We can't unsee it. But it was also it's overshadowed the game where Carlton blew a lead.
Yeah, well, we do need to move on.
Yeah, we need to get on to the
blew a lead and a kid basically with one short,
and a kid playing his 100th game who won the game for Collingwood.
Yeah,
they don't win it without Nick Daicos.
Oh,
I don't think they win many games.
Yeah, let's lighten the mood and celebrate Nick Daicos, because his last quarter was a tour de force.
The goal that he kicked, it felt like he deserved 3 score assists for his own goal. He was sort of like, he got it out of the middle for a clearance and then gave it off, got it back, gave it off, got to the goal line and kicked the goal. And the mark that he took late in the game was very reminiscent of his father as a forward, just sort of holding the body position. And
well, that was a free.
Yeah, it was a free,
but he still took the mark. Look, I don't want to overplay it, but some of his handballs, the handball he did to Elliott and the handball he did that led to one of the other goals, I think it was Lipinski kicked a goal where he gave it to Elliott. He's on the ground in both instances and he does the handball.
Yes.
The handballs were so fast.
Yeah.
The camera, the 7/Fox coverage did not pick it up. Yeah. He's ahead of the camera. It's so quick. The way he sees the game unfold is incredible. And I think he's, on what I've seen, we can have debates about he's the best player in the comp, whether it's him or Bontempelli, to maybe, I think Isaac Heaney is now in that conversation. But I think he's, at the moment, I think he has the biggest impact on games of any player at the moment. And I would say without hesitation, if he's on track to be the best Collingwood player since the 30s. I've seen Scott Pendlebury and Peter, his father, and seen Nathan Buckley, and his impact on the results of games is enormous.
And only just ticked over 100 games. So,
well, what do you think, Carol? I mean, you've been around.
I think he's the best player. I'm putting him past Marcus at the moment, but Marcus has obviously done it for many more years. And in terms of reliability, stability, long-term brilliant performances, Marcus Bontempelli wins. But as we sit here today, he's the best player in the competition.
Yeah,
and I love Isaac Heaney. I think he's been extraordinary this year.
Yeah.
But Nick Daicos has been better.
Well, the interesting thing, Jake, as well, is that it was a team that couldn't score at all in the first. They were inaccurate. But the inaccuracy was from set shots, and a lot of those, they had a lot of shots they should have got early on, and certainly Carlton missed a lot of shots they should have got. But the last quarter, I think, for Collingwood would be that there was some speed on the ball that they haven't played with in hitherto this year, and it was more reminiscent of like 23 ball movement in that last quarter, where it was fast and get it in and gave their forwards a chance that they haven't given them in the opening rounds.
The other thing that happened here that's really encouraging for Collingwood, because they don't have a great group of young players, obviously, which we've talked about and written about, was that Oscar Steen in the ruck. Got hand on the ball. Some of those went directly to Nick Daicos, including that first one where he socketed it off the ground. That had a big impact on the game. And it was interesting that as soon as Steen went out of the centre bounce and Darcy Cameron went in, Carlton immediately kicked a goal. So there's something there, and he kicked 2 goals. So they've got one young player that's having an impact early in the season. Carlton, I liked the fact, as bad as this was on multiple levels, including the Hollands debacle, that at least this time they actually kicked back and you had a chance to tie the game.
Dreadful to see such a young player miss a shot. Yeah. It happened all through the round, didn't it?
Yeah.
But more experienced players than him had cracks and missed. And I did love the way the Carlton players certainly got around him.
And Pendlebury went straight over, was one of the first to get to him.
He's a clever player, Scott Pendlebury. Some of the things he did in the middle, oh, wow.
So it's one thing about the round. If you look at the Hollands thing, it's the, to quote Charles Dickens, it's the worst of times, but it was the best of times when you look at the games. Look at the
Super
Melbourne
Saturday.
The games were the Essendon Gold Coast game. I found fantastic to watch.
Port Adelaide Hawthorn.
This is some of the best games in a round I've seen for a while. I don't know about you guys, but
as usual, when incompetence reigns off the field, what do you turn to? The greatest game in the world that this mob running the game at the moment just lucked onto. They just lucked onto it.
Well, the Port Hawthorn game I thought was interesting because Port stuffed up with the matchup on Watson in the first quarter. He kicked a few in the first, and just the game was blown. But I really liked the way, and I wrote about it, but that Andy Collins, who was at Hawthorn, goes to Port as their director of coaching and clearly comes in with a plan. When you play Hawthorn, you need to go. You can't go long. You need ground balls, and you need to spread the defence and go wide. That second quarter, Hawthorn didn't have an answer for them. They owned the ball, moved it. Jason Dunstall was hilarious in the second quarter. Yeah. Jason was hilarious in commentary on it. He was loving it. He's like, look at how they've challenged them. Look at how and Hawthorn were lazy and the way they pushed up and didn't stop. Look, yeah, Hawthorn reacted and responded, but that, I think, was a clear blueprint of a way to play Hawthorn. You can't feed Barras and Sicily and Battle with long balls in, although their intercept marks will be telling.
It is extraordinary that two Hawthorn players jumper punch the same port opponent.
I know.
And look, I mean, we don't know if they're going to appeal
They
at
didn't
time
punch his
of
jumper. They got him right in the guts.
Yeah, well, punch. Yeah, exactly. Yes, they punched that. So Dylan Moore and the captain, co-captain James Sicily, unless they appeal, and I don't really see what grounds they've got.
They'll challenge.
Well, they might, but I don't see how they get off, Jake.
Speaking at this time, some of you are going to be listening to this after, but they'll be challenging.
Yeah, and I'll be very surprised they got off.
It'd be well, if they do, there'll be a few questions asked about other ones that didn't get off earlier in the year. But anyway, that's a lack of discipline that shouldn't have taken place. Extraordinary too that Zach Butters was fined again. I know not for umpire abuse, but still. And I just want to give a shout out to Jason Horne-Francis, because it's all been about Zach Butters this year, but he is an extraordinary player.
Yeah.
And they really missed him late last year when he got injured. So
he's a Brownlow type player, but in a team that won't win enough games for him to get near a Brownlow this year anyway.
Potentially.
I tell you what, it's a pity that looks like obviously Butters is going to leave. To have two players like that in the same team, it's such a good platform to build a contending team for a long time. Like, it's rare that you get two players that are potentially top 10 in the AFL in the same midfield.
Yeah,
and they have them.
Good point.
Well, actually, Butters is in the top 10 and Horne-Francis is getting there.
You touched on the Suns game. The Bombers, even in
Bombers
losing, they make you feel better about them than 3 weeks ago. Like the last two weeks, beating Melbourne and then backing up and not being disgraced in what has been
second half against the Bulldogs.
Really hard team to play against. Yeah, second half against the Bulldogs. Really hard place to win up on the Gold Coast.
I don't know if this is too long a bow, and I don't know where this is all going to end up, but I think that I commend Andrew Welsh and the club for coming out for Brad Scott strongly. I think that it sends a message to the players that this is how we're going. And
I'm looking at my watch, Jake.
Yeah, no.
Should have happened weeks earlier.
Well.
No, it should have.
It's if you compare it to Voss at Carlton, where there's been more equivocation.
Yeah, I didn't love the timing of it, Jake, when it was like...
They didn't. No, they were talking to me before that.
Yeah, we all know they say they were going to do it, but we all know that, and we all believe that. We all believe that the interviews were going to happen with yourself and the Herald Sun before they'd beaten Melbourne. But the fact is, they all appeared on the Monday or Tuesday after that game, and weeks earlier, you got Brad Scott fronting up to the media twice a week. It was horrific to watch half the time, and the only other person we were hearing from was Andrew McGrath. Captain by default, really. And I just thought to not hear from the new CEO, who I know is new in the game and is getting media training, etc., and Andrew Welsh when Andrew Welsh had led the decision to keep Zach Merritt, which it was looking dreadful a month ago, looking a bit better now, and I applauded at the time, so I don't want to be too hypocritical about this, but given that he robbed them of the chance to rebuild quicker with early draft picks, and I know they weren't brilliant picks, but they weren't bad. I just thought, I'm glad he spoke when he did, but he should have spoken earlier.
I get the reason that you wait, because when the president speaks up to defend the coach, you can't do it weekly. You only get one or two shots at it, and going so early in the season to say, "Oh, we're backing our coach." Well, of course you're backing your coach. It's round 3, so you wait. But I thought it looked a bit. And I know that they'd been planning for that.
I want to make very clear to the listeners, very, very clear. This was arranged before, not after.
Yes.
As I was about to say.
It should have been arranged weeks before.
Yep.
But then for it to come out, we've won a game and now we're happy to jump on the front foot. That's how it looked. We've won a game and everything's fine again. I don't think that was the right timing for it.
Well, they not to go into personal things, but they postponed the interview out of a personal circumstance.
Yeah, no, I get that. I know.
So I'm obviously
and
going
we should mention that your dear dad Hugh passed away last week, the week before.
And I just want to say
we're all incredibly sympathetic about that, and you were lucky to have him for as long as you did, Jake. So we are thinking of you, but despite all of that, it still should have happened even before all of that took place.
Yep.
And on that note, we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk some bad news out of the Bulldogs.
We're online all the time. Just search Age Real Footy on Facebook or Twitter.
Hines is out. Oh, look out. That does not look good at all for Sam Darcy, and concern for the player. And so there should be.
No, that's not good. I feel sick, actually. Put some weight down on it and it just collapsed under him.
Welcome back, and they were ugly scenes for the Bulldogs down at the Cattery, with not just the scoreline, but more importantly, Sam Darcy's knee, one of the great talents of the young talents of the game. And on top of that, a bunch of injuries, but also really troubling with Libba as well. Tom Liberatore, another concussion. He's had a history of them. But
yeah, it's coming to the point where you sort of have to question.
Well, he had to go before a panel last time, didn't he?
Yeah. He's had a brilliant career.
Oh.
He's a premiership player. I don't know. I know he's the ultimate warrior, spiritual leader of that footy club, but I just hated to see that. And I don't know who's talking to Tom Liberatore, but you just have to wonder how much longer he's going to continue, because you want him, there's a lot of life after footy.
And the Sam Darcy injury, Jake, the first feeling you have is, well, the Bulldogs can't win it. They can't win it without Sam Darcy.
The way the Bulldogs are no, I don't.
I know that may prove to be wrong, but
they've still got other good
feeling
players,
is that.
Yeah.
People said that about Richmond in 2019 when Alex Rance went down.
Yeah.
Early in the season, and you would have thought he was just as important at the time.
Yes.
I mean, you described him as, you thought, that one of the greatest defenders who's ever played. So I reckon they can still win it without him, but all these other injuries that have happened.
Yeah, I think that's more the point.
English still missing. Then
English still
O'Donnell.
missing. Yep. O'Donnell picks up an injury. Libba is a huge. I mean, Libba, we just take Libba for granted, Tom Liberatore for granted, for just being a tremendous player around Bontempelli. And it puts a massive load on Bontempelli. And of course, Ed Richards has had some interruptions.
And to be brutal, Jake, they weren't looking all that brilliant before Sam Darcy went down over the weekend, were they? I know Geelong are hard to beat there, but even so, on paper, you would say the Bulldogs should take it up to Geelong and potentially.
None of us would have tipped them.
None of us tipped them.
We didn't.
None of us tipped them to lose by.
No, they got smacked. But yeah, credit to Geelong. We don't talk much about them, but they're just.
Bailey Smith and Max Holmes are just having some sort of seasons. Aren't they?
Well, Jeremy Cameron had a pretty good game.
Yeah, he did. He did, but.
Do you think he'll get the Brownlow votes? Close.
Probably still goes to Lockie Neal. Oh, sorry.
If he doesn't, there's an outcry. Seriously.
I think he'll get the votes.
I don't want to be engaging in umpire abuse at this time of the year, but...
Yeah. And good for Bailey Smith also got on the front foot immediately after that game to reach out and comment about Elijah Hollands too.
He should use his own issues for good, and that's what he was doing, which is commendable.
Yeah. What does it say about the Cats? Is it, they beat a side that we expect them to beat down there, and another one of the inequities of the draw. The Dogs always get to have to go down and play Geelong down there, where other teams
The Dogs are a premiership
don't.
side. They go to Geelong and they beat Geelong.
Richmond was a premiership side. Collingwood's a premiership side. Collingwood didn't have to go down there.
Richmond did.
Richmond did.
No, Collingwood hasn't been. They're unaware that it exists.
Apparently, they're going to have to go there in due course. But Carlton don't go there very much. Essendon hardly ever go there. So yeah, that's true. Richmond.
Yeah, but Brisbane do. I mean, come on,
Brisbane beat them.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, is that fair to them? That
Fremantle did and should have beaten them not so long ago.
Yeah. I think Geelong are just one of those teams. If you want to beat them, you have to play. A team that beats them plays generally very well. If you play anything less than very well, they get you. They're kind of just an absolute bedrock team of the competition that they're going to be top six again. In my view, I think they'll be top six again.
What did you think of the return of the tagger too? Like Ocean Mullen went to Bontempelli. I think he got 14 touches. That first game, he's had no marks, no tackles for a game. The best player in the competition across a couple of seasons, or in the best couple. And to be completely shut down like that was, particularly with others down, was really profound impact on that game.
Yeah, he's very good at that.
Does it point to, there have been more teams that are using it? Chris Scott's one of the better coaches in the AFL, and he's prepared to break system to apply the tagger.
In some circumstances.
That's right, yeah, but you still
I think
break
the really big one to watch here will be when they play Collingwood with Nick Daicos, with Mullen, and also Sydney with Heaney.
I don't see why it would be a question with Collingwood, because you stop Daicos and you are going to pretty much stop them. So.
St Kilda would have beaten Collingwood if they'd tagged Nick Daicos.
You think so?
And even St Kilda people are saying that now. So, of course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you should tag these players.
One of the best games of the weekend was left to one of the last games in that Brisbane-Melbourne game. They're an exciting team, Melbourne. This was, I think their wins have all been over 100. They've kicked over 100 points. Yes, they've given up over 100 points in the losses they've had, but 10, I think it was 8 or 10 lead changes in this game to then keep coming at Brisbane.
It was a brilliant game, and when Brisbane surged again at the end,
with a brilliant
the Charlie
Cameron goal.
So you think, of course, and there were milestone games for two, very, very proud premiership Lions. So you sort of just felt that Brisbane would overcome them. They play well at the MCG now, but that was an extraordinary effort by Melbourne to hang on and win, despite they've been making mistakes, but they almost celebrate the mistakes now. And I think we've talked about the change of coach, and I'm not knocking the last coach because I was a big admirer of Simon Goodwin, but this lack of process-driven coaching seems to be working for them. I mean, they were dreadful at Gather Round. They were terrible against us.
I reckon they rolled in just expecting to win and Gather Round. I thought
Stephen King sort of admitted he took some of the blame, didn't he?
Yeah, there was a bit of swagger about them where we'll just knock them over.
To think that they're doing this and the way Petrarca's playing. So Petrarca's got, 9 Brownlow votes for sure, hasn't he?
Yeah.
At least, you would say. And he's missed a number of games with the hamstring. He's been sensational at the Suns in the games he's played. They've let him go and Oliver's gone and they're looking better. Like this has been a triumph for Melbourne this season so far. It's actually been well above budget, I would say. And even I'm not a fan of music and extra noise after games, but I didn't mind the Irish.
Unless it's an Irish jig.
I loved it.
I
loved it. I almost expected Michael Flatley to bound.
And the fans got behind it, so look.
I know, and it looks even better when you win, doesn't it?
Everything looks better when you win, Caro.
Yeah. But the two things can be true, that Petrarca going has been good for both teams. Like it's been good. It's actually helped Melbourne. The whole reset and cultural change has been important for Melbourne. I still think they were aware pre-season that there's a vulnerability to them for injury, and when they're playing this high intensity game of high running, fast attack the game, that particularly with young players that they've loaded up in the off season with a change of program, that they will be vulnerable to some of them breaking down. So it wouldn't surprise me if come mid-season they get a handful of injuries and lose a few games. But right now, that would still be the short-term pain for the longer term, like building these players into a style of game that they want to play. And the style of game they want them to play right now is so attractive to watch.
And they've got the Tigers on Friday night, so...
Oh, what a fizzer that is.
Well, it's disappointing, really, isn't it? There have been some really good Anzac Eve clashes, but recently, with Richmond's capitulation to the depths of despair where they are at the moment, with injury but also poor performance, it's
injury masking or clouding the issue of the pace of the rebuild or the success of the change?
How do you feel about this now?
Oh, I think the gap between Richmond and everyone is now so stark, isn't it? I mean, what did they lose by 75 points to North Melbourne, who, yes, have improved, and yes, it's about time some of these great draft concessions they were given came to fruition, but they are, so let's praise North Melbourne for that at least. That was just appalling. And, yeah, look, injuries galore.
They lost players in the game, which didn't help.
Yeah, but, and now they've lost Taranto, Rioli. So you just sort of think...
Banks.
Yeah, it's...
how long is this going to take, Gleeson, Caro?
Well, I thought they'd have a worse year this year than last year. Yeah. I thought last year they probably outperformed.
They were good.
But no, it's going to take... you're looking at the moment, I mean, I do remember Damien Hardwick was it 2010, and it just looked like they were never going to win a game. And then I think they finally broke the drought against Port Adelaide.
They won 6 that year.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, and, we know now that players in that team ended up being... enduring champions who will be Hall of Famers one day. But no, it's I'm thinking 5 years at least.
I think from 2024, it's 7 years. That to be a potential contender. I think it's 7 years from 2024. The club's own plan says 5 years from now, doesn't it? To win a flag within 5 years.
Yeah, but one of the hiccups to that, or the road speed humps to that, is that the young players that they expected now to be developing aren't playing. They lost 2 years on Gibcus from injury. Smiley's Smiley is yet to play. Houghton has been missing. They've got players that are just not there and not getting those games in that you would expect, that by the time they get to 22 and 23 have got 50 to 70 games under the belt and ready to start to make a move. And that really affects the pace of the development of the rest of the list.
Well, one thing they can do, though, is if they because they'll get pick one in the draft, very likely. If they get pick one in the draft, they've already got the players they got. They've got Lawler, they've got these other players. With the draft hauls they've had, in a couple of years, they should be able to get free agents. So they should be attractive enough to draw players as they're starting to come up, whereas some other clubs like North Melbourne don't have that same possibility.
Is it too soon to be pointing the finger at a draft miss with Murphy Reid?
So you can mount the argument, particularly if they were very aware of him, had watched him play, the coach would have known him intimately. Yeah, I think you can. I mean, Richmond weren't the only club to overlook Murphy Reid.
No.
But Richmond had a lot of picks.
Yeah. Couple of appeals this week. The Butters foot thing that personally I thought should never have got to the tribunal in the way that it should. It should have just been mediated, sat in a room. Foot, I think, had a bit of a Barbara Streisand moment where it's the official challenge made things worse.
Yeah, look, I think Pete Ryan wrote a really good column about this, and this might sound brutal, but we shouldn't have umpires being ambassadors or appearing for Sportsbet. It shouldn't have been allowed. Now, I'm not suggesting he's corrupt. Of course he's not. I'm not suggesting that, there is anything untoward about what he's doing with Sportsbet in connection with his job as an umpire. But it's a terrible look. People say, he's passionate about racing, he's passionate about horses, about, the form. Well, go and work for an equine company. Seriously, it's just a really, really bad look, and that's going to linger.
The AFL's always been soft on gambling, in my view.
Yep,
they've been soft on it the whole time. And it's a cultural thing, I think.
It's a bit surprising you couldn't reach that. They couldn't have discussed the idea that, and Foot said, "Well, look, this is what I heard, but I allow for the fact that you might have said something different." But
he's not
this is what,
for that.
and he's not allowing for that. And I was a bit surprised by that. And I think that the other part of this that irritated me slightly is this indignance at the idea that a player or a football club might lie.
I know.
They lie as a matter of course in football
clubs. But there's
clubs.
something we're not mentioning here. People believe their own lies.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying anyone is knowingly lying.
No.
I absolutely believe Nick Foot thought he heard Zach Butters say that. And I absolutely believe Zach Butters believes he never said, how much are they paying you? But someone has made a mistake. Now, that is why this was a mediation situation. Yeah. And frankly, and I know St Kilda are going to push for this in the future. And James Gallagher, the new players boss, said this last week. I honestly think that should have been a mediation as well.
Collard?
Yeah. And I think, I want to mention the late, great Tony Peake, because he was the one who created this, he originated the mediation idea. And I think there have been other situations where umpires and players have got together and mediated and stuff's happened behind the scenes, and it didn't happen. It's been embarrassing for everyone and for Greg Swan in his first, one of his first big tests.
You go back to the Hawthorn scandal. There were different versions of conversations, and it cost the AFL and the club about $10 million, several $1 million. Let's say,
yep.
If they'd come into a room in the first place and talked about what do you think was said? Why was this? They might have saved a lot of trouble.
So St Kilda, I think, even if they didn't have a point of law, would have appealed because of the deep level of upset from Lance Collard's teammates, particularly his First Nations teammates. They felt they had an obligation. It's sensitive for St Kilda because they have a strong relationship with Pride and the LGBTQI plus community. But I think they've managed that as well as they can. And I think that I'm looking forward to I think it's Thursday night it's going to happen. I'm looking forward to it because I think they've got a case.
Of course they've got a case. But it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but is there not also players on the other team that have essentially put him in? So I think one thing that judges and tribunals have to do to take a slightly counter view is they have to weigh up the who has a vested interest in a particular version of events and who does not.
There's no dispute that he leant right into his ear, right up to his head, and he spoke into his ear. It's pretty hard to mishear something when someone talks straight into your ear. On that note, we'll take a break and come back with quick questions.
Get access to every episode as it drops. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
McKercher, still no one comes at him. Just bounces freely, takes on Lawler. Eat my dust.
I love that.
Runs to 50, bangs it long. Can he get the finish? Lucky! It's all coming up roses.
Well, welcome back and straight into quick questions. Simon asks, comments that Clarko is starting to swing some aggressive positional moves. Does this mean North have entered the next phase of their development, and can they make finals this year?
Well, I know they can't make finals this year in my view, but
not even the top 10?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. But I think they're on the right. They're finally starting to get something together. And I think one thing, a question's been answered. There was so much speculation about Alistair Clarkson. I cannot see a scenario where, I can see a scenario, but I think he's very likely to be coaching next year with his contract.
Yeah, well, I think you look at North, they've been, Port are a poor side this year with outs and whatever.
Richmond.
Carlton have been, limping along. Essendon. So they're teams that they probably should beat. They lost to West Coast. It was a really good win to beat Richmond, but this is the next, they're all the teams that are in that bottom bracket. This next stage of games will decide just how far North will actually jump this year. I mean, I know that can be a bit self-evident in the ladder, but and the fixture, but I don't think they've done anything terribly surprising this year in the wins, and that's not to diminish them because they've smacked Richmond, and they've been really strong in the wins that they've had, but this is now the real test of how far they go. I like the Zuha move behind the ball. I thought, that was good. I thought that was interesting. He doesn't strike me as a natural defender because he's a
good overhead mark.
Yeah, he's a good overhead mark. He could be that. He could be a Sicily type sort of interceptor, just plays the ball and helps rebound it. And the way Curtis is playing and Trembath is marking everything, they're looking. It hasn't sort of robbed their attack.
No. Yeah, no, that's a good call.
Stu asks, the two derbies in round 6 were hidden on the fixture. Should the AFL be doing more to promote these rivalries, Caro?
Well, look, yes, they should. And we've got 3 more of these Friday night doubleheaders coming up over the next 4 or 5 weeks. But unfortunately, and I've written extensively about this, the AFL did a deal with Fox Footy to exclusively have Saturday football. Not only did they do that, but games broadcast into their own home states, if they're on free-to-air on a Saturday, are shown on an hour and a half delay up until round 9 in the case of 2 states and round 11 in the case of the other 2. So Sydney, to get that Friday night game, to get a free-to-air game before round 11, have to play Friday or Sunday. So I can understand why Channel 7 don't want to have 2, Sydney GWS broadcast around the whole nation. I can understand why Channel 7 don't want the showdown in a couple of Friday nights broadcast around the whole nation. But that's the way it's going to be because of this Foxtel deal and because of the AFL, the deal the AFL has done. So for that reason, I don't mind the Friday night doubleheaders. But you'd have to say that because of everything else that happened on Friday night, that game, who even remembers Sydney GWS? It just completely disappeared unless it was broadcast live into Sydney, which is great. But it's a problem of the AFL's own doing. I can understand now how they're remedying it, but it's a pity. I think there's one game out of Perth that's going to be 50 minutes different from the game out of Melbourne. But when they're only 10 minutes apart, that's a problem too. Because at least if it's 50 minutes apart, you can watch one half and then turn. Anyway,
Yeah.
fixtures going to deliver a lot of problems for the AFL over the next year, not least because of the centenary test early next year, and of course the American game. Just wait, if Geelong qualify for a home final.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they'll have a good case to play it at GMHBA this year.
Yeah.
That week,
and then Tassie coming in, and then what happens with gather round, and what happens with the opening round. And, well, we know that'll go, but
And please stop calling it opening round. Just call it round one.
I know.
It never stuck. Unlike gather round, I just want to give a brief mention to Gillan McLaughlin, because I think he came up with gather round against the advice of all the marketing experts and commercial experts. What a great name.
Great name.
We all first heard it, went, gather round, that's ridiculous. But it was a great idea.
Yeah.
Whoever says opening round, everyone says round zero.
It doesn't make any sense to me, but it's just a name.
Of course it makes sense. We all gather round.
Oh, yeah, okay. What's on your radar for the week? What are you looking ahead to?
I'm looking to Tassie, not the Tassie Devils. But Gold Coast are going down to play Hawthorn, Jake, on Anzac Day. Lots of games on Anzac Day this year because it falls on a Saturday. I know they've won 4 games at Gold Coast, and I think they're sitting 4th at the moment, but they need a good performance against a good team because they have not been convincing the last few weeks.
Yep.
Your thoughts?
I thought Gold Coast were leaky against Essendon, and I'd favour Hawthorn on this game. I think Hawthorn.
Absolutely.
Hawthorn in Tassie, they should.
Yeah, Hawthorn are hard to beat in Tassie, and Hawthorn have not done much wrong. Your comments about Port working them out a bit, notwithstanding, I think, but it is a very big game because they're both top 6 looking teams.
This is not to diminish Hawthorn at all. They've had some good run of luck with the injuries that oppositions have had when they've played them. Goulden and Heaney out, English out. They've had a couple of games where the teams have really been missing. You obviously had Lukosius and Rosie. Now, I know they've missed Day and they had Gunston out at the weekend as well. But I think that Hawthorn, this is a big game for Hawthorn too, to take off, to knock over I know Gold Coast don't sound like a big game, but it is. This is important.
Well, I'm looking forward to 2 things. One is just as a game, the Brisbane at the Gabba against the Crows. The Crows, look, they got away with it against St Kilda. St Kilda could have won that game. I think St Kilda were pretty good. They didn't have Dawson, and I think Dawson's one of their best 3 players. So how they go up there is going to be very interesting. From an occasion point of view, I'm fascinated by what Essendon can do on Anzac Day, and I'm going to be there as a guest of the Bombers, so I'm looking forward to seeing the occasion.
What about you, Michael?
Well, in a strange way, I'm also interested to see how Carlton respond this week. They're away. Elijah's not going to play. They're over in Perth, and I just...
Mackay, probably not.
Mackay, yeah. I really be interested. Yeah,
what's wrong with Mackay?
He got a concussion. So I'll be interested to see how they respond as a group and as a team, and whether there's a bonding effect of being away, and or quite how that plays out. So, also I spoke with Maynard this morning and with Nick Daicos. So obviously Anzac Day dominates a bit of the conversation, probably less so than it does in a normal year when
it's a standalone game.
It's a standalone game, and it changes a little bit. Anyway, that is all we've got time for this week. Thank you to both for joining us. Thanks also to Channel 7 and Fox Footy for the audio we've used in this episode. If any of the topics discussed on this podcast cause you distress, reach out for help. Beyond Blue on 1300 22 4636 is a good place to start. For all the latest footy news and analysis, go to theage.com.au, and to get in touch with us, email realfootypod@theage.com.au. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can catch Andrew Wu and Peter Ryan on Thursday when they preview the coming round of AFL matches and talk footy tipping. This podcast will be back next Monday. See you then.